Do forgive the sound of feedback right here. Okay. Let's see where we are. Okay, mic check. Sound seems to be alright. Okay, I'm looking at my monitor over there, so you know, the layout of the studio is I'm here, that's over there. Let's see. UB Masako? Alright, here we go. Can you guys hear me okay? If you can, that'll be a very nice bit of feedback. That would be very, very much appreciated. So that means I know. Alright, turn voice up. 1 second. I'm using my Surface laptop as a means to do so. But audio is all good? Hey, awesome. Alright. Okay, cool. That's good to know. So, basically, why have I called you all here today? Well, I got some handy dandy equipment. And basically, now I'm just going to turn auto rotate off right now because this is rotation lock on. So that means this doesn't happen. There we go. So basically, I got an Elgato Camlink, one of these things or something like that. And it means I can use my GH5 as a webcam. So it means I can use the legitimate equipment, you know, the lav mic, all that kind of stuff, to read to you a story I found from a very, very incredible source. But yeah, so basically, if you want to leave a super chat, like almost at the round table you can, but that's more kind of like towards the channel. I won't be able to do any what if requests. This is specifically for one story. And I'll read through some super chats in between the chapters and stuff like that, because we got like 11 of them to go through. So let's see, we got 489 people here today, so that's incredible. That is remarkable. Let's see if we can get more. So do feel free to share the love, everybody. But this is by Megane-chan 720. And if you want to follow along with the story, you can read it in the description. But for now, I am going to be just simply reading. And let me know if everything's okay. If the sound goes off, just double check. That means I know what's going on. So I just need to make sure the audio level is okay. That's still going. And yeah, don't want to touch the wire or anything. Oh, no, don't move the camera. Everything's fine. But let's just do one last check of the chat. Sweet. Also, if you want to get the Dragon Ball Z Strongest Mama shirt, you certainly can. And also, be sure to drop a like. Be sure to drop a like, get loads of people. Wow, we've got 500 people in here. Again, super chat's most welcome if possible. And I will read some of them out during each chapter. So we have 11 chapters to go through. Let's see how many we can get through. But again, link to the story in the description. And there you can find it. But we're keeping it nice and simple here. No graphics, no overlays. Just reading from a book or a Surface Pro. But anyway, what if Gine went with Goku to Earth? Just sit back, everybody. Just relax. Have this on in the background, whatnot. There we begin. Megane-chan 720. A mother can't let go of her child so easily. What if Gine went with her son into hiding and stayed on Earth to raise him? An adaptation of the video series by me. And let's begin. It would actually help if I actually went to the right chapter. Here we go. Author's note. I find MasakoX's storytelling to be really evocative, especially considering he's usually only summarizing or sketching out little scenes. Things have changed since this was written. It made me wonder what this story would be like all written out. And that's what we're doing today. Alright. Gine was the only Saiyan who worked in the mess hall, and she, mostly, liked it that way. It was lonely sometimes, since her co-workers gave her a wide berth and didn't say much to her. But in a lot of ways, it was better than hanging out with other Saiyans, who barely treated her like she was the same species. Her weakness stood out less next to beings who didn't judge their worth in power levels. She was preparing the meat for the next lunch rush when Bardock came in the kitchen, causing the other cooks to scatter in fear. Gine was so startled to see him here, of all places, that she sliced through the tip of her glove, although luckily she missed her finger. Bardock looked at the ruined glove with disdain, but instead of commenting on it, he met her eyes. "I have something to tell you," he said. He looked unusually somber. Normally he was easygoing, not too bothered by anything. It was one of the things that Gine had found attractive about him, but she had been as surprised as anyone when he agreed to couple with her. She had been even more surprised when he agreed to do it again. She doubted there would be a third time, though. The results of that coupling were currently in the nursery and a disappointment to pretty much everyone except Gine herself. "What is it?" she asked. Bardock looked uneasily around the kitchen. The cooks were all huddled in the back corner, some of them with dishes burning on the stove in their absence. He stepped closer to her and lowered his voice. "Frieza is going to blow up the planet," he said. His meaning didn't immediately penetrate, but once it did, Gine brought her hand up to her mouth in dismay. "That's awful," she said. "But why would he do that? The Saiyans are his best soldiers." Rather than answer her question, Bardock looked surprised. "Are you saying you believe me?" Gine nodded. "You wouldn't lie about something like that," she said. A rare look of respect entered his eyes, and she treasured it, although it was hard to care about such things in the aftermath of news like that. "If you really believe me, then you've got to get Kakarot off planet before Frieza gets here. We don't have much time." "What are you going to do?" "Go fight him, obviously," said Bardock with a smirk. Gine couldn't help but answer it back with a smile. "What should I do after that?" she asked. The smirk settled down back into something more apathetic. "Wherever you want," he said, shrugging. As long as it's not totally useless, I don't care." The remark stung more than it might have normally, coming on the heels as it did of something almost like camaraderie between them. But this apathy towards her well-being was more his usual style, so Gine shrugged it off. "Be careful," she said before he rushed off. He didn't even turn around to acknowledge her words. Without another glance at her terrified co-workers, Gine stripped off her gloves and hurried out of the kitchen, rising up the maze-like passageways of the main complex to the nursery. Once she got there, she quickly stepped down the rows until she found Kakarot, easy to spot due to his intense resemblance to Bardock. He was also easy to spot because he was bawling his lungs out, making the baby next to him squirm and cry in response. But once she picked him up, he stopped. She couldn't help but smile at that, despite everything. Years of being on the bottom of the Saiyan totem pole had taught Gine how to stay out of people's way and not attract attention, so she made it to the pod departure area undetected. It was empty, all outgoing missions having been temporarily suspended. She would have found that suspicious, except now she knew why. She found a pod with a destination already programmed in, a planet so weak it was practically a joke mission, which was doubtless why an infant was going to be sent there. She wondered if it was the very pod that Kakarot had been destined for. She placed him inside and then stepped back, ready to engage the startup sequence. Upon being set down, Kakarot had resumed crying, and Gine found her hand hovering over the button to engage the pod, unable to press it. Foolishly, she had asked to be present when Raditz was sent off on his own infant mission. It was not normal behavior for a Saiyan mother to ask such a thing, and that strange look from everyone present had made it even worse. When she actually started to get emotional, seeing Kakarot in a similar pod under even worse circumstances made her actually start to tear up. A Saiyan infant sent out on a purging mission was always retrieved before they were too old to be reconditioned. Raditz had returned in a few months' time, already bigger and more self-sufficient than when he left. But if Bardock was right, Kakarot would never be retrieved from this infant mission. If he was lucky, he would be found by some Earthling and be raised as one of their own. More likely, he would simply destroy every civilization on the planet. And then, hot fat tears began to roll down Gine's face. Even if Kakarot did complete his mission and killed all the Earthlings, he would still have plenty of non-sentient indigenous life forms to keep him alive. But what kind of life would he lead? He would know only killing and nothing more. At best, he would live out his days as a feral creature, barely more intelligent than the animals that he'd hunted, and at worst, Frieza would find him and kill him like he was planning to do to the rest of them. It was very possible all Gine was doing was just delaying the inevitable. In his infantile rage, Kakarot was now flailing his arms and crying even louder. Gine bent forward without thinking to try to comfort him, but before she could, he accidentally smacked the internal door button. Before she knew what was happening, the door had lowered and pushed her into the pod with Kakarot, where she lay in a jumbled heap. She felt the engines began to hum to life, but from her upside-down position, she had no leverage with which to hit the emergency stop button. It was all she could do to hold on to Kakarot as she felt them both begin to ascend into space. She thought several times during the next few minutes of trying desperately to turn herself around and gain control of the craft, but every time she thought of going back down to that planet, only to have to get out of the pod again and send Kakarot on his way, she couldn't do it. Maybe it was better this way anyway. Bardock had told her not to do something useless. Well, maybe this counted. Maybe it didn't. But as she snuggled closer to her son and let the stasis sleep take her, she didn't much care which one it was. Well, that was certainly something right there. And let's just check the super chats in a moment. So let's check that. That was chapter 1. So we got plenty of ways to go right here. So let's just see what we got. Okay. Paparazzi says, what if you read this in front of a fireplace? Don't worry. If you guys like this one, I will certainly look into moving it into a different location. Noah Sturban, hey, not sure if you said this elsewhere, but are you still doing OC reviews? I need Tomiya to be judged. Ah, yes. I will be getting to that very, very soon. And Red Dragon Force 2, is there a link to reread this at a later point? Absolutely. Check the link in the description to Megane-chan 720's story so you can read along as well. And then Mark Galvin, is this hinting for the next part of What If Gine went with Goku to Earth? Well, no, because this story only covers the first 3 parts, I'm afraid. So we need to have more of this happen. Absolutely. But there we go. So thank you very much for your contributions, everybody. But let's just see. Wow, we got 646 viewers currently. Gosh, that's so cool. Thank you so much for sticking around, everyone. And don't worry, if you've missed any of this, you can always look back earlier, or you can check out the archive later. It will be archived. A big story requires a big jug of water. I'm just saying. Okay. Let's see where we are right now. Okay. Do excuse me for a second. Let's just make sure everything is tickety-boo. Just checking the strength of the thing. I'm still coming in all right, okay? 627 viewers. 630 viewers so far. Wow. Awesome. Thank you so much for sticking around, everybody. Right. Let's move on to the next chapter whilst my live streaming thing has basically... All right, cool. Okay. Okay, this is getting a little irritating now because my viewer activity, which I'd normally be able to see, Latvian Dragon, there's another one based on your Reddit series. Really? Well, do leave a link to me on Twitter about that. Papa Mada Metcha, hey Masako, love this little storytime thing you got going. Also, hope you had a good weekend. I certainly did. And I'll be having a very good one as well, going to Akumacon, where the voice of the Omni King in the dub is going to be. That's going to be cool. And Paparazzi again, is this Saiyan equivalent of humanity? Insanity? my haircut definitely needs its own channel. 360 likes. Guys, do drop a like. Do drop more likes. We need this to trend. But anyway, let's get back to chapter 2. Gohan and Gine. Every day in the early afternoon, Son Gohan took a walk. It was partially for his constitution. Prudence couldn't keep one regular on their own, after all. And partially because the life of a hermit could be rather boring sometimes. The natural scenery around Mount Paozu was unparalleled in all of the world. Absolutely. And he felt lucky to be able to enjoy it whenever he wanted. Although this far into the mountains, there were many wild creatures that could be dangerous to humans, he never worried. He had his walking stick and his martial arts training, and if he ran into something capable of taking out one of the star pupils of Master Roshi, then he figured he deserved whatever he got. Today, he decided to take the north path up to the waterfall, but as he approached the place he could... Let me just check. But as he approached the place, he could sense that something was amiss. The birds were quiet, or missing, and had clearly spooked the wildlife. There was very little up there that was afraid of humans, and so normally, on his walks, he saw plenty of small animals that simply watched him curiously as he passed by. Today, what few creatures were out and about at all scurried back into their hidey holes the second they noticed him coming. Soon, he found the reason for all of the trouble. About halfway up to the waterfall, there was a break in the trees where normally there wasn't one, and as he got closer, he could see a rather large crater in the ground that hadn't been there before. The air held the smell of ozone and freshly upturned earth. Something had happened recently, perhaps even early this morning before he'd awoken. Cautiously, he approached the lip of the crater, making sure his feet were firmly planted on solid ground before sticking his head over the precipice. At the center of the crater was not a large meteorite, as he had been expecting, but some sort of vehicle or device. It didn't look like anything Gohan was familiar with, and the door was open. Fearing that someone had been hurt, Gohan slid gently down the side of the crater and over to the vehicle. He slowly peeked his head inside and noticed two things right away. One, there was no one inside, meaning that whoever had occupied this vehicle had been at least well enough to leave it. And two, it was filled with more technology and wires and buttons than he knew what to do with. It was very possible that Capsule Corp, or some similar company, had come up with inventions even more fantastical than the ones he was familiar with during his time in isolation. But he doubted it. There was something about this craft that was decidedly otherworldly. Fearing perhaps that whoever had occupied the craft was nearby but too injured to call for help, Gohan reached out with his senses to try to see if he could find anyone. Before he could properly settle his mind, however, he heard a rustling in the bushes above the crater. He looked up and saw what looked like a brown tail poking out of the bushes. There was a slight rustle as the tail was jerked back inside the cover of leaves, although not all the way. Curious and a little amused, Gohan walked quietly closer to the bush and, using his walking stick, he gently poked the tail where it was still barely visible behind a scant cover of leaves. Immediately, the tail fuzzed out, an expected reaction. What was unexpected, however, was the accompanying cry of a baby. Even more unexpected was the young girl that launched herself out of the bush with her fist raised, clearly intent on punching him. Gohan moved easily out of the way, and with nothing to take the force of her punch, the girl fell flat on her face on the ground. In an instant, she jumped back up and was looking around wildly. When she caught sight of Gohan, her eyes widened with fear, and after staring at him for a moment, during which he did not move or do anything threatening, she turned tail and fled. Turning tail was more accurate in this case than Gohan had ever known it to be. The tail that had first caught his notice seemed to belong to the baby in her arms, but as she turned around and leapt away, he could see that the girl had a matching one. She moved fast, faster than Gohan had known most people could move other than himself, and a few select others, of course. And before very long, she was gone, along with all evidence that she had been there. Gohan, not in the habit of borrowing trouble, looked back down at the pod at the center of the crater, as though perhaps it could explain something. But when nothing seemed to be forthcoming, he shrugged and turned around to go home. As part of his daily routine, once his walk was finished, Gohan would fix himself up a hearty lunch. He usually didn't bother with breakfast, and dinner was usually simple foods. Lunch was his chance to go all out. And today, despite not having walked as far as usual, curiosity seemed to have done the work of increasing his appetite for him in the place of exercise. The beans that had been soaking since the previous night now went into a pot over a nice fire, along with fresh vegetables from his garden, and a little bit of preserved fish. He got out the last of the jerky and opened up a new jar of pickled eggs. Once the oven was hot enough, he took the dough that had been rising all morning and put it inside. Before long, the smells of baking bread and piping hot soup filled the tiny hut, and Gohan, although not as consumed by his bodily appetites as he had once been, could admit that here was a meal worth eating. Right as he was sitting down ready to eat, however, the door burst open hard enough that it rocked it off its hinges and fell to the floor with a clatter. Standing in the doorway, eyes wide and crazed, was the young girl from earlier. Gohan could do nothing but stare as she looked wildly around the hut. Her eyes fell on Gohan, and she took a step forward threateningly. And all together now, "Where's the food?" she shouted. Gohan noticed the baby in her arms, which took an opportunity to let out an especially loud yell of its own. Realizing the person that had busted down his door and was demanding his food was holding a baby, softened her crazy demeanor in Gohan's eyes, from serial killer to frazzled mother. "Please, come in, sit down, have some food," Gohan said, as though it were normal for his guest to burst in uninvited. "You must be starving." As the girl moved cautiously into the room and slowly sat down, looking as though she was ready to flee at a moment's notice, curiosity welled up inside Gohan yet again. She was certainly wearing strange clothing. It was possible that changing fashions in the city had resulted in what looked like some kind of armor or something, but somehow he doubted it. The pod and the crater, not to mention the tails, all pointed to there being a story here, and a very strange one at that. The babe in arms was crying even louder now, though, and the girl was staring at the table with unfocused eyes, so Gohan put his questions to the back of his mind for now, and gestured to the food. There was no hesitation. Before Gohan was even aware of what was happening, half of the food was already gone. All the jerky in practically one bite, and half the loaf of bread in another. The girl paused for breath and to hand the baby some of the pickled eggs, which it tore into with as much ravenous enthusiasm as its mother. Then she was back at it, gulping down a bowl of soup and asking for another, before Gohan had even managed to put the ladle back in the pot. Once every scrap of his lunch was totally gone, minus one small bowl of soup Gohan managed to smuggle into his gullet before his guests could notice, the baby fell asleep, with his head cradled comfortably against his mother's shoulder. "Now, my dear," Gohan said kindly, "why don't you tell me what you're doing out here? You've obviously been through a lot. Are you in some kind of trouble?" Gohan did not miss the way the young mother's hand curled a little tighter around her child's back protectively. She looked down at the wood-grain table and seemed to think for a moment. Then she looked back up and met Gohan's eyes. "I suppose there's no reason not to tell you the full story," she said, "but I don't know if you'll believe me." Gohan smiled. He stood and began gathering the tea things. "Why don't I fix you a cuppa, and you tell me the whole story, and I'll be the judge of that." Over 2 cups of piping hot tea, the girl began to relate a tale as strange as Gohan had ever heard. A tale of space emperors and planetary genocide, of space travel and revenge and legendary warriors, of a mother trying to protect her child while mourning for another child and a man that was only something like a husband. By the end of it, Gohan had only one question. "But you're not here to do that to Earth, are you?" Gine shook her head vehemently. "We're just here to get away from Frieza," she said. "I didn't really have a plan after that, but I have no interest in purging planets. I'm not much like other Saiyans," she admitted, stroking Kakarot's hair pensively. "I'm weak, and I don't like bloodshed. Kakarot is weak too, so he probably takes after me, I suppose. We might end up just living here. We've nowhere else to go." She looked back up at Gohan with a wry smile on her face. "Do you think I could pass as an Earthling?" "Absolutely, my dear," Gohan said. "Why, there's nothing strange about you except your clothes, which are easily fixed. And that tail. Even that's just a bit unusual. If I didn't know better, I'd say you're a normal Earthwoman." "A normal Earthwoman," Gine repeated softly. "That doesn't sound half bad." "While you're getting your bearings, why don't you stay here? It's out of the way, quiet.
The accommodations are a little small, but I certainly wouldn't mind some company for a while.
And the food is to die for, Gine said with a grin. If you really don't mind, I might just take you up on that.
Gohan didn't mind, but that night he got a bit of a nasty shock. As he was gathering up his bedroll, content to sleep in the woodshed, while Gine and the baby took the bed, Gine turned to him suddenly.
I just remembered something, she said. It won't be a problem with me, but don't let little Kakarot ever look at the full moon.
Gohan stood up slowly, amazed. Why ever not? He asked incredulously.
Gine looked almost ashamed. Whenever a Saiyan looks at a full moon, they take on their Uzaru form. I suppose to you it would look like a giant ape or something. A child as young as Kakarot won't be able to control the form, and he would almost certainly kill you.
My goodness, Gohan breathed. You Saiyans seem to be full of surprises. I will certainly keep that in mind. He moved to turn away, and then thought of something and turned back. Is it only if they look directly at the full moon? Gine nodded.
Even a half a moon or almost full moon won't do.
I wonder, Gohan muttered to himself as he rummaged through the cabinet in the back wall. Eventually, he emerged with a pair of sunglasses. If he were wearing these, would that prevent the transformation? Gine took the unfamiliar object and inspected it. Gohan took it from her and placed it on her face. She smiled when she realized what it was.
Oh, I see. It reduces the amount of light your eyes receive. Yeah, that would do just fine.
She took the glasses off and turned them around, placing them on Kakarot's face. The glasses were comically oversized, and she laughed. Kakarot, aware only that his mother was laughing, giggled in response, which only made her laugh harder. Soon, the two of them were laughing uproariously, with Gohan looking on, a fond smile on his face. If Gine did not bring up leaving to go somewhere else, he wouldn't bring it up either. Having such smiles and laughter around the Hermitage would certainly make it less lonely, if a little less like a Hermitage. And that's the end of chapter 2. All right, wow. Okay, cool, we got even more people in. Nice, good to see you all, everyone. Let's check out the super chats for what we had from last time. Okay. Oh no. Oh, is it frozen? Oh, dang. 1 second, guys. Let's just fix this. I'm not too sure what's going on here, so I need to probably refresh this 1 second. 1 second. Oh, dang it. Okay, there we go. I'm terribly sorry about that, everyone. Alright, that should do it. Yeah, I can see that. That's all good. Right, so if you just let me know about that, terribly sorry. Yeah, Red Dragon Force. Again, terribly sorry about this. And this is the problem of testing brand new equipment on a stream. And yeah, the audio, I could tell the audio was going by, so you guys could actually hear it. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't read the chat as we're going. But fortunately, that seems to be all right. Okay. Audio's still good. Let's see. Check the super chats. All right. Dion Joyner. I need more Parda. I miss him. I know. Parda is definitely someone I really enjoyed as well. But unfortunately, you know, it's something that I need to think like more for stuff. But let's see. Hopefully everything should be okay. I can see it still going. Paparacha, this reading has already inspired a half dozen what-ifs for next week. Oh boy. Okay, that could be fun. Okay. Making a Massacre stud account. Alright, also a bit of an audio lag. Yeah, again, I think I just need to finesse the actual equipment. So, you know, it requires maybe kind of like a bit of audio adjustment or something like that. But, yeah. Okay. Alright. Charles Gray goes, "No, I saw a camera. Freeze it like the rest." Again, terribly sorry about that, but it just goes to show. If you're ever investing in wanting to become a YouTuber, invest in sound. So long as the sound's good, people will put up with a frozen camera. So, again, yeah, terribly sorry about it. That is an extreme thirst. Yeah, this is like 1.5 liters. You're going to need it. This is an extreme story. Alright. Audio desync? Okay, again, camera's looking alright. Microphone's looking alright. And Joe the Medical, thank you very much. What if these what ifs were combined into one giant what if? What if Raditz, Nappa, and Cell turned good and Gine went to Earth? Well, we are working on that. We are working on a What Infinity thing. Water slurp ASMR. Oh yeah, because I'm wearing a lav mic. That would do it. Okay, that's fair enough. Alright, I'll try and keep that to a minimum. Okay, it's getting a little hot, but let's see. Let's see how things go. But again, camera's alright, I can see that there. I'll try and keep an eye on it and like to the side. But let's go. Let's continue. Right, nearly 600 people. Keep the likes coming, guys, and keep the super chats coming. It's really appreciated. Chapter 3. To settle one's soul. The next day, Gohan made one of his rare trips into town. Gine stayed behind to fix the door. I can't guarantee much, she said, holding the hammer awkwardly, but I'll try to follow your instructions as best as I can. Whatever you do will be fine, Gohan said. If you really can't figure it out, go ahead and leave it for me to fix when I get back. But I've got to fix it. I'm the one that broke it after all, she said earnestly. If it's not fixed by the time you get back, You'll let me help you finish it, Gohan said kindly, before she could threaten to do something desperate. I appreciate the gesture, but there's no need for you to go to such great lengths. Honestly, I'm a little less worried about the door and more worried about how you two are going to feed yourselves. How much does a warrior know about cooking anyway? Oh, don't worry about that, Gine said dismissively, waving her hand in the air. Cooking is one of the few things I'm actually good at. It was my job back on planet Vegeta. I suppose it's probably gone by now. A harrow look came over her face, and she stared at the hammer in her hand without truly seeing it. Gohan patted her arm. She met his eyes, and he gave her a comforting look. He hoped it was enough. There really wasn't anything he could say. When Gohan returned 2 days later, he found a roughshod door badly fitted in his doorway, a young Kakarot sitting in the yard wearing one of his shirts like an oversized dress, crying his eyes out, and Gine outside taking her frustrations out on a block of wood. When she saw Gohan coming, she dropped the wood and ran to him. I'm so sorry, she wailed. I almost burned your house down, and the door doesn't actually open. You have to take the board down in order to get in and out, and Kakarot soiled all your clothes except that shirt, and I don't know where the clothes washing facilities are. Gohan chuckled, setting down the heavy pack full of fabric for new clothes for Gine and Kakarot, along with other supplies. First things first, he said. When you say you didn't burn the house down, how not burned are we talking about here? It turned out, not very. The ceiling was a little blackened, and the pot she had been using would never be the same, but it was nothing that wasn't easily fixed. While Gohan taught Gine the finer points of washing clothes by hand, Kakarot played with the fabric he had bought, his impulse to tear it apart with his teeth quickly corrected by his mother. This is for wearing, not eating, Kakarot, she scolded, draping the cloth around herself. Like this. Clumsily, the little boy attempted to pull a sheet of fabric around him in the same manner as his mother, but only succeeded in pulling it over his head entirely. Gine laughed, and Gohan was relieved to see that the sorrow and heaviness he had left her with had already begun to lift. Dinner that night was delicious, courtesy of Gine. She had been unused to an open wood fire for cooking complex dishes, but once Gohan gave her some tips, she was able to make a very serviceable stew. Don't you humans have stoves and things like that? Gine asked as she watched the fire carefully and adjusted for hot spots as Gohan had instructed. The info dump made it seem like you're practically ready for space travel. Info dump? Gohan asked, pulling his needle through the sleeve of the garment he was working on. What's that? Oh, it's just this thing that gives us all the knowledge we need while we're traveling to another planet, Gine said distractedly. Gohan blinked, impressed. That's amazing. I'm almost positive we don't have technology like that here on Earth. But to answer your earlier question, yes, we do have stoves and hover cars and washing machines. I simply choose to live a simpler life. But why? Gine asked, sprinkling on the spices and giving the stew a taste. Why give up technology if you have it? I mean, no offense, but you humans already seem a bit primitive to me. But why go even more primitive? A fair question, Gohan said, holding up his work to inspect the scene. Kakarot was gnawing on a chew toy Gohan had got him in town, but he had nearly bitten clean through it. So Gohan was already trying to think of other things he could stick in that ravenous mouth to keep him from inflicting real property damage. There are plenty of humans that would understand my lifestyle either. As a martial arts master, I've decided to give up worldly pursuits and cares in the interest of clearing my mind and allowing my spirit to be free.
A martial arts master? Gine repeated, turning around to look at him incredulously. You're a fighter? I had no idea.
True, I don't look it. I'm full of surprises, actually. I used to be quite handsome in my younger days, too.
Gine laughed and turned back to the soup. If you'd like, I would love to spar with you later, she said, giving the soup another taste.
I thought you said you didn't like fighting, Gohan pointed out, starting on the hem.
I don't like being forced to go around just killing things on someone else's orders, Gine said bitingly, but I'm still a Saiyan. Fighting isn't our blood. I would just rather do it for fun.
Was all that Gohan could reply with. While Gine sat at the table, he tried the little shirt he'd been making on Kakarot. The boy squirmed and tried to bite him, but at a sharp word from his mother, he stilled, and Gohan pulled the shirt over his head. Gohan still didn't quite believe that this child was only a few days old. He was already practically walking. The shirt fit fine, and once Kakarot realized Gohan had been trying to dress him, not tie him up or eat him, the little boy smoothed his hands down the blue fabric over and over again, clearly fascinated. When Gine caught sight of him, she gave him a smile.
You look very nice, Kakarot, she said. Tell Grandpa Gohan thank you.
Kakarot turned to Gohan and babbled unintelligibly. Gohan decided to take it as an expression of gratitude, though it was impossible to tell. Grandpa Gohan, he mused. I like the sound of that. As the days and weeks and months went by, the three of them began to integrate into each other's lives seamlessly. Gine had put her armor away and wore the clothes that Gohan had made for her. She cooked and cleaned and hunted, when both of them quietly did not mention the possibility of her leaving again. When all the chores were done and Gohan was in the mood, they sparred. Gine had to go easy on him, of course, but quite a bit less easy than she'd been anticipating, considering the average power level of this planet. Sometimes she almost wished for a scouter so she could read his power level. It was so hard to tell. Sometimes she would lightly tap him and he'd go flying, but then other times he would move her limbs in such a way that she ended up on the ground without hardly knowing how she got there. If you're anything to go by, Gohan said, after one of these sparring sessions, it's clear the Saiyans rely more on brute force than they do on technique. You're pretty formidable as you are, but if I were to teach you, you would truly be something else. Gine, who'd never been called formidable in her entire life, looked away pensively.
I don't know, she said. I think I like the idea of leaving the killing life behind.
Who said anything about killing? Gohan scolded. What I'm talking about is the martial arts. They're used for peace and self-defense. They can also be used for self-improvement and to settle one's own soul. Killing doesn't even have to enter the equation.
Settle one's soul? Gine rolled these words around her mouth like she enjoyed the taste of them. That I could handle.
Then it was decided. The sparring sessions turned into teaching sessions, and when the Kakarot was old enough, he joined in too. One night after a bedtime story, Kakarot lay drowsing, and Gine was nearly half asleep herself when he spoke.
Mama, do I have a papa?
The story had been about a mother and a father, and the realization that she was about to have that conversation gave Gine an adrenaline rush that woke her right up.
You did. He's dead now.
Gine sometimes surprised Gohan with her bluntness in talking to Kakarot about such unsavory concepts, but she saw no reason to hide reality from him. And though she wanted to live as an Earthling, secretly, she thought some of the social mores were a little silly. Just because someone was a child didn't mean that they were exempt from death or violence. Kakarot digested that.
What was he like?
Was his next question. Gine thought about how to answer. Distantly apathetic, if she wanted to answer candidly. Quiet for a Saiyan, but not above boasting. Strong, but not power-hungry. He was the type of man who saw to his own needs and pleasures and didn't seem to care about anyone else's. She knew from comments that she'd overheard from his teammates in the mess hall that he probably did care about them, in his own way. But if those feelings extended to her, she had never seen evidence of it. Their first coupling had been motivated by boredom and availability on his part, and something like hero worship on hers. The second time had been much the same. The fact they had never coupled with anyone else had given her hope for a long time that his feelings for her were special, but she could see now, with the perspective distance gives, that Bardock was not the kind of man to do something that sentimental. He had coupled with her and no one else because that's what he'd felt like doing, plain and simple. Her feelings had not entered into the equation one bit. "He looked exactly like you," she said to Kakarot, "except he had a scar on his cheek, like this." She traced an X on Kakarot's left cheek, a ticklish sensation making him giggle softly. "Was he strong?" he asked, his voice a quiet murmur as he drifted further and further into sleep. "Yes," Gine said. "Stronger than Grandpa Gohan?" She laughed, a small exhale through her nose. "Yes, even stronger than Grandpa Gohan." "Wow," Kakarot breathed, his eyes closed. Gine wondered if he would even remember this conversation later. "You think I'll be as strong as him?" "My dear, you'll be even stronger," Gine whispered. Kakarot began to snore, and Gine lay awake for a long time that night. All right. That is chapter 3, people. And whoa, okay. We got 752 people. Gosh. And I can see that the monitor is doing all right. It's doing okay. Let's see. Let's see what we got here. Is it frozen? No, it seems to be all right. ZachVet92 says, would you consider Avatar The Last Bender what ifs? Unfortunately, I don't really know much about the series, so I really can't answer you on that one. Okay. What do you guys think of the story at chapter 3? I want to actually have a good kind of talk with you about this. What do you think? And again, if you're watching this on archive, I recommend you have the live chat open, because that's what I'm seeing. Unlucky 2 Link says, really warms my heart. Yeah. Oh, why's my room flashing? I've got the ceiling fan on. Just so you know, I'm probably just gonna take my dressing gown off while I'm thinking about it, and trying to do this with one arm is not very easy. It's not very wise to do. So I'm just gonna do that. Take that off. Okay. Yeah, no, it's really, really good. And Joe Evans, I really wish there were. Yeah, I was really wishing that there'd be more. This isn't me writing this. The basic premise, yeah, that's me. But this chap who's done it, Mega Knight Chan 720, you really need to go and tell them, write more. I really want them to write more. I'm imploring you. Seriously, if you're listening to this or watching, please continue this. You have my absolute condoning for this. Red Dragon Force 2, would Kakarot be willing to meet Bardock? I don't know right now. I don't know whether that would come up at the moment, but I think he's kind of over it. And Papa Archer, so sweet. I love it. And again, this is on fanfiction.net. Link is in the description if you want to catch up with it. Okay, let's see what we got. 741 views. Wow, that's so cool. Again, guys, do drop a like. We need to get loads and loads of likes. Let's get to 1,000 likes, by the end of this stream. Let's see if we can do that. Let's see if we can do that, people. All right, let's get on with Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Bulma and the Dragon Balls. Okay, let's make sure I've got enough. I've just got to check the batteries of the microphone to see whether... Going good? Yes, we are. We are full batteries. All right, cool. Chapter 4, Bulma and the Dragon Balls. I'm done chopping the wood. I'm gonna go get us some dinner now. Gine looked up to find Kakarot already waving to her as he walked down the path to the woods. Get fish this time, she called after him. I know you like tiger, but that's all we've had for the last 3 nights. He gave her an extra enthusiastic wave in acknowledgement, and then he was off. Gine sighed fondly and sat back on her heels, taking a break from weeding the garden to look up at the sky. It was a beautiful day, a sky a deep blue, padded with puffy white clouds and, from her perspective, ringed by the lush branches of deep green trees. The weather was pleasantly warm without being too hot. Her son was growing into a fine young man, and the deer seemed to have finally gotten the message not to mess with her rhubarb. Gine gave another sigh and closed her eyes in bliss. "What's all this sighing for?" Gohan teased, coming up behind her. She smiled and opened her eyes. "Nothing," she said. "Or at least, nothing's wrong. I was just thinking that there isn't a single thing I could wish for that would make me any happier than I am right now." Gohan's eyes crinkled as his face folded into a wide smile. "I can't tell you how happy I am to hear that," he said. "Although I will point out that this particular bout of contentment seems to have come immediately after Kakarot left. No?" Gine chuckled in acknowledgement. "You might have something there," she said. "I mean, don't get me wrong, I love having him here, but he's getting old enough that he's a little trying on Mother's nerves. In sane society, he would have already left home by now." "But you tell me he's years away from becoming an adult," Gohan said, setting down the basket of potatoes he was carrying and easing himself down on a nearby bench. Gine slowly pulled off her gloves and sat down cross-legged. "Well, yes, in a manner of speaking, that's true. It's more like he's years away from bearing age. Well, in his case, siring age. But he's certainly old enough to be living on his own. He has been for years." Gohan shook his head slowly. "It never fails to amaze me how different Saiyans are from humans." "Were," Gine corrected gently. "There are no Saiyans anymore." Then, before the mood could turn somber, she continued. "I've already decided that if Kakarot doesn't want to leave, I won't force the issue until he hits his adult growth spurt. At that point, he's going to have to leave whether he wants to or not, for the sake of all our sanities." Gohan chuckled. The wind turned, rustling the trees, and Gine stood up suddenly, sniffing the air. "Someone's coming," she said. Gohan stood more sedately, looking in the same direction as Gine. "Indeed," he said calmly. "I'll go put these in the storehouse while you greet our guest." He did so, without giving Gine time to protest. Standing absolutely still, she watched the path of the house carefully. After a moment, Kakarot could be seen skipping along, carrying a large fish. At least it wasn't tiger, Gine thought, but there was a scent on the air that was neither Kakarot nor fish. He turned around a bend in the path and revealed another figure, a human girl. That explained the scent, but it did not explain the vague unease that Gine felt. This girl was hardly a threat to her physical safety. Perhaps it was nerves. Gohan was the only human she had ever met after all, and now she was about to meet another one whether she was ready for it or not. "That's my ma!" Kakarot announced, the two of them having come close enough to be within earshot. "Look, Ma! It's a human girl!" he shouted across the yard. The unease gave way to a mother's instinct to correct her son's manners. "I can see that, Kakarot," she said, walking closer. "There's no need to shout. It's nice to meet you," she said to the girl, giving her a bow. "My name is Gine. What brings you all the way out here?" Closer up, Gine could see that this girl was very young, possibly almost as young as Kakarot. She clearly thought her clothes were suitable for adventuring, but if she really intended on dressing like that out in these woods, she was going to get eaten alive by mosquitoes and scratched up intensely by brambles in no time. Nerves battled with motherly concern. The girl gave a bow in return, looking bewildered. "My name is Bulma," she said, and then seemed to shake off her surprise. "And I'm out here looking for something." She reached into a pouch at her waist and pulled out a small orange orb. "You wouldn't happen to have seen one of these, would you?" Gine studied the orb in amazement. "Kakarot, does that thing look like the thing that Grandpa Gohan has?" "Yeah, you're right," Kakarot said, studying the orb with equal fascination. "I didn't know there were more of them." "There are 7 in total," Bulma announced, clearly feeling pleased about knowing something that they didn't. "I've only got 2 so far. Can you show me the one you have?" I suppose so," Gine said slowly, but her hesitation was lost on Kakarot, who was already leading Bulma into the house. She took in a deep, steadying breath, reminding herself that Gohan hadn't seemed the least bit concerned. It was just a human child looking for some pretty jewels after all. There was no good reason to feel as jumpy as she did. Still, a little caution never hurt anybody. She followed them into the house.
And if you gather all 7, supposedly you get a wish from a magical dragon, Bulma was explaining to Gohan and Kakarot.
And what is it that you're going to wish for? Gohan asked. Bulma smiled brightly at him.
A lifetime supply of strawberries.
Gine was a little appalled. There was no way that was the truth. Except she didn't seem to be lying.
You must really like strawberries, Gine said, moving further into the house and getting the tea things ready. Nothing better, Bulma agreed. They're a little hard to get in the city. Most of the year, the only ones you can find are shriveled up and sour. But there's just nothing better in the whole world than a sweet, plump strawberry, freshly picked.
I would have to agree with you there, Gohan said, chuckling. He noticed Gine moving in such a way to keep Bulma in her line of sight at all times, and gave her an indulgent smile that she ignored. And our cut would be, what, a bushel of strawberries sent up here yearly at all?
Naturally,
Bulma agreed with a chuckle. Gine realized the wish hadn't been a lie. It had merely been flippant. She didn't really believe in the legend. She was just a spoiled city girl out for a little fun. Feeling contrite about having been so suspicious, she forced her eyes off of the girl, and that was how she noticed Kakarot staring at her, hanging on Bulma's every word. Seeing this sparked an idea in her brain, and she sat down at the table with the rest of them, while the tea steeped.
Are you out here all by yourself, Bulma? She asked.
Bulma nodded.
Isn't that dangerous? Oh, I'm fine. I've got my pistol and a bunch of vehicle capsules. Speaking of which, I've been meaning to ask you. Kakarot here says he's an alien. Normally I wouldn't buy into that kind of silly talk, but he totally flipped over my car with his bare hands.
Gine forced herself to stay calm. She'd never told Kakarot not to tell anyone that they were from another planet, but Gohan had not been able to make any predictions about how people would react, and there was always the possibility that the reaction could be negative. Bulma was looking at her expectantly, clearly ready to hear some kind of explanation that didn't involve extraterrestrials.
It's true, Gine said. We came here when Kakarot was a baby. Our planet was destroyed, and we had nowhere else to go.
Bulma digested this, looking back and forth between Gine and Kakarot, waiting for someone to announce that, they were only pulling their leg. No one did.
I guess that would explain the tails, she said eventually.
And that seemed to be it. Gine was pretty sure she didn't believe them, but that was better than mass hysteria. Gohan stood up. Let me see if I can find my... what's it called? Dragon Ball? Dargan Ball? He went to the cupboard, where he kept his knickknacks and a small selection of cookbooks and books, and pulled out the orb. Kakarot had played with it sometimes as a baby, but no matter how hard he chomped down on it, he never left any teeth marks. Bulma's eyes widened as she saw it. All talk of aliens apparently forgotten.
That's it! That's the 4-star ball!
Gohan set it on the table, and Bulma pulled out her two and set them next to it. They all stared in wonderment for a moment. Well, young lady, I see no reason why you shouldn't have this trinket, Gohan said. I will put one condition on it, however.
And what would that be?
Bulma asked suspiciously, clearly unwilling to blindly agree to anything. Gohan smiled. If you do manage to find all 7, and a magical dragon really does appear, just come back and tell me about it. I would love to know if the legend was true.
You have yourself a deal,
Bulma said, grinning, and she and Gohan shook on it.
I have a proposal, Gine said. Why don't you take Kakarot with you on your journey? He knows these woods as well as anyone. He could be your guide.
She was much more interested in Kakarot keeping the poor girl from getting killed or eaten, but it was clear that she had her pride, and also a very stunted understanding of how dangerous the wilds could be. There was also the added benefit of getting the boy out of her hair for a while, but she could pretend it was mostly altruism. Bulma looked thoughtfully at the offer, but Kakarot nearly leapt out of his seat.
Can I come? I would love to go on an adventure. It'll be so exciting!
Bulma laughed.
Well, I guess if you're that enthusiastic, how can I say no? And you're clearly strong enough to be useful. Just no more flipping over cars, okay? I only have so many of those. Deal! Kakarot shouted, extending his hand for her to shake as well. She did, and then winced as he squeezed too hard. Watch it, kid! I'm a delicate female who requires special handling. We're gonna have to get some ground rules, I can tell. Sorry, Kakarot sang. I forgot how weak you humans are. Bulma made a face. I'm going to be generous and not take offense to that, she said. Thanks, Kakarot said, oblivious to her sarcasm. Gine was ecstatic. They were already getting along so well. She was a lot less ecstatic later that night, when she realized that cutting the apron strings would be more difficult for the mother than for the child. But what if he hurt someone? She said, biting her knuckle as she paced around the cabin. He still has trouble controlling his Uzaru form. What if he forgets himself and looks at the full moon? We didn't even tell Bulma to worry about that. Gohan laughed at her. You're worrying over nothing, my dear. Kakarot is a practical child in his own way. You've drilled the importance of not looking at the full moon to his head well enough. But he's stronger than humans. What if he forgets himself and just hurts someone on accident? And what if the moon was made of green cheese? Gohan snapped. Gine looked up at him, startled. He didn't seem angry, but he did seem stern. When he saw that she had stopped pacing and he had her full attention, he continued. You need to trust your son. Didn't you tell me yourself he's old enough to be living on his own? That includes controlling himself well enough not to hurt people. He'll be fine. You did a fine job raising him, and now the rest is up to him. Gine hesitated, and then sagged slightly as she let her tension out in a slow breath. She gave Gohan an apologetic smile, and sat down at the table across from him. You're right, of course, she said. It's just that I can't help but worry. Is this what it's like to be a human? Gohan chuckled. I think this is what it is to be a mother, she said. Many weeks later, as Gine was hanging the laundry up to dry, she heard a strange noise in the air, and looked up to find a yellow cloud swooping down out of the sky. Before she could do more than set down her basket of sheets, Kakarot leapt out of the cloud and jumped into her arms. There was a happy cacophony of greetings and yelling as they hugged, and Kakarot tried to explain every part of his adventure at once, and Gine tried to get him to slow down and simultaneously call Gohan from where he was in the house. Eventually, they managed to get Kakarot inside and fed, where he related the story in a jumble of names and non-sequiturs. One name in particular jumped out at Gohan. Oh, you met good old Ox King, did you? Yeah, is it true you really trained with him under Master Roshi? I sure did. How's the old boy doing these days? He was a warlord and had a mountain full of treasure, but Master Roshi told him not to be bad anymore, so he won't, and he has a daughter named Chi-Chi, and he's single, Mom. Kakarot fixed her with a wide-eyed, innocent stare, his verbal torrent abruptly coming to a stop as he waited for her to respond. It took a moment for that last part to sink in, and when it did, Gine blushed and fidgeted with her teacup. Thank you for that, Kakarot, she said, ignoring Gohan's amused grin. He rescued her a moment later by asking if the Dragon Balls had turned out to be really granting wishes. Yeah, they really do. I mean, I didn't see it, but they said there was a big dragon that shot up into the sky. What did you end up wishing for? Panties. I beg your pardon? Panties. A long wish for panties. I don't know why. I think he already had underwear of his own. Gohan muttered something about another Roshi, but Gine turned to Kakarot and asked, Why didn't you see the dragon, son? Immediately, Kakarot wilted, staring down at the tabletop, looking ashamed. I had to go Uzaru, he admitted. We were trapped in a dungeon, and it was the only way to get out. They cut off my tail because I couldn't control it. He looked so ashamed and so forlorn that Gine could do nothing but get out of her chair and kneel down next to his, putting her arms around him. He buried his face in her shoulder. I'm not angry, Kakarot, she assured him. No one was hurt, right? So don't worry about it. Just make sure to be careful next time, okay? Kakarot nodded. Almost immediately, he brightened up and sat up. Master Roshi said I can train him if I want to. Can I, Mom? Can I? Who's Roshi again? She asked, recognizing the name, but not where it had come in Kakarot's haphazard story. Why, that's my old master, Gohan said. If anyone can teach the boy, it's him. You want to keep learning the martial arts? Gine asked her son carefully. Kakarot nodded enthusiastically. I really like fighting. I didn't know it was so much fun, especially when you're fighting a bad guy and you don't have to hold back. Gine took in a deep, steadying breath. She had promised herself long ago, when Kakarot was small, that if he wanted to follow his Saiyan heritage and become a fighter, she wouldn't stand in his way. The only thing she would put her foot down about was senseless killing. But it sounded like Kakarot wasn't interested in that at all. If that's what you want, Gine said. Yeah, I'll make you proud, Ma. Gine smiled fondly. I know you will, my son, she said. All right. That's the end of chapter 4. Woo! All right, 770 views. Wow. Definitely coming along nicely. And more super chats. Awesome. We're getting there towards our absolute... We're getting towards our target of 1,000 likes. Let's see. Oh, Charles Gray, thank you very much for becoming a member. Thank you, thank you. Alright, and Codemaster921, definitely very, very well written and engaging. It certainly is. Is the sudden drop in audio quality? What might change? Oh dear. Oh dearie me. Okay, alright, that's the camera audio. Alright.
Okay, that should do it. Ah, dang it. Terribly sorry about that. Again, this is something I don't really have access to the audio chat. It's basically because I adjusted and checked the battery. That's why it did it. But hopefully that should be alright. Alright. There we go. That should probably do it. Alright. Paparacha, I was just behind a car with a baby on board decal with a picture of baby Goku above it. Awesome. Again, terribly sorry, everybody. Okay. Alright, that should probably fix it. Yeah, the icon's all good. Okay. Alright, so... Podo, have you ever read any of the chapters of My What If on the Reddit so far? Or so is the tag I'm forgetting to use? Don't worry, Podo, I have been looking around on the subreddit, just for looking at stories like this, but I'll get back to yours eventually. Red Dragon Force 2, audiobook should sponsor your excellent voice. I am actually on Audible, so I am taking requests and, like, you know, auditions and stuff like that. So in a way, this is actually kind of good practice. Alright. Frostbite, I really enjoyed the story so far. Alright. Okay. Okay, subreddit is r/MasakoX, just so you know. And, vlogging Akumakon, I might do. I'll see how I go. But, yeah. I basically just had to plug in the mic, so sometimes the mic input is a little bit iffy. But yeah, I think everything should be alright. But still, 814 views. Yeah, we're getting towards 1,000 likes. We definitely want that. Actually, probably need a bit more of that. Alright. Again, terribly sorry for the audio mic drop. Again, it's just to make sure that... Because the audio icon is on there, so I have to double check sometimes. Okay. Alright. And again, you can check the pinned comment up there if you want to get yourself a Strongest Mama t-shirt. Alright, okay. Next chapter. Don't worry, Tomahawk. We're coming up with that right now. Alright, okay, cool. Now, this one, we do have a little bit of a time skip, just so you know. And, yeah, we're still on that. We're still good. We're still good. Alright. Now, if the mic battery does drop out again, that will explain why. It's basically using the in-camera audio, that's why. Chapter 5. Krillin and Kakarot. It was a lovely tournament, right up until Krillin's death. Gine had reluctantly allowed her son to talk her into going to watch him this time. A few hours before the tournament was to start, he turned up wearing nothing but a tiger skin and a bright grin. He had gained a few inches and quite a bit of muscle in the time she had last seen him, and his usual whirlwind of activity and hurried stories had somehow ended up with her and Gohan perched behind him on the Nimbus. Master Roshi said I was supposed to go all around the world without using Nimbus so I could train, but I think we'll probably be late if we don't use it since you guys are too slow, he explained apologetically. Gine and Gohan shared an amused grimace at this, and didn't bother correcting him. Once they arrived and Kakarot had made rushed introductions, Gine spent a very pleasant few minutes getting to know people she had only ever heard about in stories, as well as getting reacquainted with Bulma. She and Gohan agreed to cover for Roshi as he went to disguise himself as Jackie Chun, and they all settled in to enjoy the tournament. The sheer variety of people she encountered in those brief hours astonished her. The info dump had not done this planet any justice. There was magic here, and psychic abilities, as well as far more strength than the average power level hinted at. Even so, humans were, still human. Bulma buried her face in Gine's shoulder upon seeing her boyfriend's leg broken, and it had actually taken Gine a few minutes to realise she was upset because of the injury, not because of the loss. Watching Tenshinhan turn away from the dark path of his master nearly brought her to tears, because it seemed as though while humans knew almost as much brutality as Saiyans did, it was also abundantly clear that they knew much more about change and forgiveness. By the time the tournament was over, Gine was exhausted. The intense succession of victories and defeats, as well as the sheer noise and mass of humanity after years of isolation, had taken its toll on her. Although she was glad that she'd come, she would be equally glad to return to her peaceful mountain home, once dinner was over, of course. As they made dinner plans, teasing Tenshinhan about his unknowingly foolhardy offer to feed 2 Saiyans, a cry rang out over the deserted tournament grounds, a sound that brought Gine straight back to her brief time serving in the combat corps. It was a sound unmistakable to anyone who had ever heard it before, the death cry of someone being murdered. "That's Krillin!" Kakarot cried, running towards the sound. Gine's heart leapt into her throat as she followed him. Krillin was Kakarot's best friend, someone he had described to her often on his sporadic visits throughout the years. She had been delighted to meet him, and impressed at his strength during his fight with her son. She prayed that she'd been wrong about the nature of the sound. Everyone gathered in the back room of the tournament grounds, and it became clear immediately that Gine had not been mistaken. Kakarot was cradling Krillin's head in his arms, his tail bristling. The tournament announcer, injured and lying on the ground next to Krillin, babbled something about a monster having stolen a Dragon Ball and the tournament roster, but Gine was watching her son, his shoulders now shaking. "Krillin's dead," he murmured, his voice low and tight with shock. Gine realized that this was the first time someone close to him had died, and her heart constricted in anguish for him. On Vegeta, this moment would have likely come much earlier in his life. Here on Earth, though, she had secretly been hoping it would never arrive. Kakarot stood up suddenly, growling deep in his throat. He grabbed his staff and turned to Bulma, eyes burning with rage. "Bulma, do you have the Dragon Radar?" Still in shock, all Bulma could do was pull the radar out of her pocket. Kakarot snatched it out of her grasp and ran out of the room. Roshi yelled for him to stop, but this shook Gine from her reverie, and she turned to him. "Kakarot will be fine," she said. Roshi looked at her incredulously. "Are you insane? That thing took out Krillin, and Kakarot is coming off an exhausting tournament. He's going to get himself killed." "Hey, what's this thing?" Oolong said before Gine could reply, holding up a piece of paper. Bulma read it aloud. "It's the character Ma, demon or sorcery in a circle." Roshi's face went white, and he turned quickly, snatching the piece of paper out of their grasp. He stared at it, haunting and trembling. "Do you know what this is?" Yamcha asked. Roshi looked up and met Gohan's eyes. "This is the seal of the great demon King Piccolo," he said. Upon hearing this, Gohan's face went as white as his master. "You don't mean the one that claimed the life of your master, Mutaito?" "The very same," Roshi said. "I've heard that name," Tenshinhan said. "He was a lord of demons said to have plunged the world into darkness many centuries ago. He was intent on killing every living thing in a reign of terror, but then he disappeared. No one seems to know what happened to him. Why is he here now?" "He shouldn't be," Roshi said. "My master sealed him away. He gave his own life to do it, and I buried the vessel on the ocean floor, never telling anyone where it was. I have no idea how Piccolo could have freed himself from that imprisonment." You mean you're saying Kakarot's gone off to fight a demon that almost destroyed the world? Yamcha asked, horrified. A little fool, Roshi muttered, shaking his head. If only I could have stopped him. All we can do now is pray. Keep your prayers, Gine said harshly. They were all acting like Kakarot was facing certain death. It's his right to try to avenge his friend. Are you saying you're not even worried about him? Ten Shinhan demanded incredulously. It was one thing when you were watching the tournament and didn't bat an eye even though your son was fighting for his life. But not to allow him to run off after a known monster that is already killed without even a shred of concern? Don't you care about your son at all? Gine strode over to Ten Shinhan and gathered his collar in a fist, pulling his head down to her height. She pierced his gaze with her own, and just for once in her life, reveled in the fact that she could blast this human into dust without even trying. Decades of being the weakest, of having to put up with horrible treatment just because she couldn't fight back, and then years of holding herself in, pulling her punches with Gohan because she didn't want to hurt him, all welled up in a rush of anger and frustration, and she let herself imagine, just for a moment, grinding this puny human stupid face in until his brain squished out the other side of his skull. She was stronger than him by a large margin, and she knew it. And in that moment, she could see that he knew it too. She released him. Kakarot and I are Saiyans, she said, as Ten Shinhan looked at her in surprise and not a little horror. We came here from another planet, the last two surviving members of a strong warrior race, she said. My son will not be so easily killed, and neither will I. He will avenge his friend's death, and I will find this Demon King Piccolo, and I will kill him. I will not let him bring my adopted homeworld to ruin. They were all staring at her now, everyone but Gohan seeming to realize for the first time that Kakarot had to have gotten his strength from somewhere. She cleared her throat and smoothed her hands down the front of her dress unnecessarily. They turned to address Bulma. If the monster took the Dragon Ball, then they must be looking for the others as well. Was the Dragon Radar you gave Kakarot the only one you have? Bulma stared at her, slack-jawed for another few seconds, but then she shook herself out of it and dashed the tears from her eyes. Yes, but I can make another one in about half a day. Would you start working on that, please? Gine asked politely. She didn't want her outburst to make them think differently of her or anything. If we go looking for the Dragon Balls ourselves, then eventually we run into the Demon King. A fine plan, assuming you're strong enough to stand up to him, Roshi said sarcastically. You don't know how powerful the Demon King is. My master Mutaito was many times stronger than I am now, and even he was no match for him. Begging your pardon, master, Gohan interjected. I don't think you need to worry about Gine here. If, as I suspect, my dear, you've been holding back on me all this time, you should stand a good chance of beating even him. Gine blushed and nodded. Gohan chuckled. I thought so. I'm afraid I can't take your word on this, Gohan, Roshi said, taking off his hat. My dear, if you are really as strong as all that, then you should probably be able to defeat me easily. Will you face me in battle? Are you idiots really gonna fight over nothing when Krillin's lying here dead, and Kakarot might be off dying too? Bulma shouted, and then burst into tears. Yamcha put an arm around her comfortingly and led her out of the room. Ten Shinhan looked uncomfortably at the outburst, but he stepped closer to Roshi. Sir, I know I don't have the right to try to give you advice after everything I've done today, but I think you should trust her. He shook his head, as though trying to clear it. If Kakarot grows up to be anything like her, then I was foolish to think well of myself for gaining a victory over him as a child. Roshi's eyes had not left Gine's. Thank you for the wish, everyone, he said coldly. But I've seen Demon King Piccolo for myself, and I will not trust his defeat to someone I haven't faced in battle. Gine gave him a slow nod. If you will permit me, she said, I would prefer that no one else watch. Roshi gave her an answering nod, and the two of them walked outside, finding a sheltered spot on the now deserted tournament grounds. Roshi shed his suit jacket and tie until he was shirtless and lowered himself into a fighting stance. Gine took her own stance.
Since this is merely about testing my strength, she said, and I don't want to hurt you, how about we put some limits on this?
Not a problem, Roshi said. I think one exchange of blows should make things clear.
In that case, why don't you go first?
I admit, Roshi said, deepening his stance. Something is telling me to take your word for it. You're certainly very sure of yourself.
Just hit me, old man, Gine said flatly.
Roshi gave a loud "Kiai" and came at her with a simple, straightforward punch that clearly had all his strength in it. If he'd fought Tenshinhan like this, he might have won. But then again, he might have killed him in the process. Gine took the blow to her stomach with barely a gasp. Truthfully, it hurt quite a lot. But if there was one thing those years of abuse had given her, it was the ability to take a beating. She smiled, her lips curling up in an almost evil expression. My turn, she said. Now that she'd seen his full strength gauged, she knew exactly how much to hold back. She gave him an answering blow in the stomach, and he wheezed painfully as all the air was forcefully expelled from his abdomen. He folded over on her fist, and she gently lowered him to the ground. He was conscious, but only barely.
I'm sorry if that was a little much for you, old-timer, she said wryly, but I did hold back as much as I could.
Roly gave a painful chuckle in reply. You've convinced me, he whispered. I will allow you to fight him. Not that I could do much to stop you, I see. But if you will permit me, I would feel much better if we had a safety measure in place.
That's fine, Gine said,
kneeling down and putting Roshi's head on her knees.
Whatever makes you feel better. All I want is to protect my new home.
I'm going to ask you to keep this a secret, Roshi said, his voice still a whisper, but sounding more and more as though it were a choice to speak softly. Though I didn't want to admit it, I do know the technique my master used to seal the Demon King, but it cost him his life to use it.
You're saying you want to have that technique ready just in case? Gine asked. That doesn't sound like you have much faith in me.
If you had seen the depths of cruelty the Demon King could sink to, you would not be offended, Roshi said. His voice trembled, and not with the pain in his stomach.
Fine, but you won't get a chance to use it, Gine said, standing and helping Roshi to his feet. He smiled, and they shook hands.
I very much hope you are right, my dear.
All right, let's check the situation. Whoa, cool, 759 people. We are coming on strong. Everything's all hunky-dory, just checking everything's all right. Okay. Joe the Medical, what if Vegeta was female, asking? Do save that for the round table, and we will have that in a what if FAQ. So just so you know. Ugh. Yeah, definitely need that. Okay, where are we now? Yep, okay. Summer, this is actually a live stream. Okay. Oh, cool. Thank you very much, man. E-Man, we're about at chapter 6 currently. We definitely have to get over 9,000 viewers. Oh, jeez. But gosh, thank you so much for watching, everybody. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Definitely, the super chats will certainly help. Definitely help the channel in this time of January. Okay, right. So we're on chapter 6. Let's just double check one thing. Everything's all hunky-dory. 896. Come on, guys. I'll do yourself a favor and go to R tree lore. Do yourself a favor and go to r/tree. I'll have to look into that. But thank you very much anyway. All right. Okay. Oof. Jeez. I'm turning into a bit of an old man myself. Just need a bit of a pillow to help kind of bolster me up a bit. Usually when I'm recording these, I don't really go longer than an hour, so this is actually untried territory. So again, do leave a like, leave a super chat, and just enjoy as we head to chapter 6. All right. The problem of King Piccolo. All right. Sounds okay. Yeah, cool. Sounds okay. Right.
Live television, everybody! Alright, the problem with King Piccolo. Gine stood facing the old Namekian, who she supposed might look like a bit like a demon to a human that had never seen one before. She'd never heard of an evil Namekian, but then she doubted many people had heard of a Saiyan who hated killing. Certainly his eyes held the kind of cruelty that was rare even among Saiyans. Eyes that spoke of someone who didn't just enjoy other people's suffering, but was nourished by it. In fact, she had seen eyes like that only one other time in her life. The one time she had ever come face to face with Frieza. Gine lowered herself down as the Namekian laughed, a harsh barking sound that sent shivers down her spine.
What is this? I see two martial arts masters standing right behind you, woman, and yet you seek to take on the mighty King Piccolo yourself? Such foolishness I've never seen in all of my days. Such cowardice on the part of those men back there. I might almost be insulted, except I plan on killing you all anyway. I suppose it doesn't matter in which order I do it.
Let me clear one thing up for you, Gine said through her teeth. Those men back there are human. I am a Saiyan.
The Namekian scoffed. And what is that supposed to be? Some kind of vegetable? A woman is a woman, regardless of what else she is.
Gine blinked in confusion for a moment, and then shook her head to clear it. So he didn't know what a Saiyan was. All the better. That way, it would come as a surprise. Without exchanging any further words, Gine launched herself at King Piccolo. She had time to savour the shock in his eyes before she slammed her fist straight into his face. He flew backwards several yards and landed heavily. She was on him before he could get up, landing an axe kick on his stomach, and then wedging her foot underneath his prone body to kicking him up into the air, where she kicked him back down to earth again. Namekians didn't have bones quite the same way Saiyans or humans did, so there was no satisfying crack of them breaking as she gave him blow after blow. But it was clear, nonetheless, that he was suffering, and a part of her buried deep drank in the sight like water that she had not seen in days. The rest of her found being the cause of someone else's pain completely distasteful, and she stepped back for a moment, centering herself, and decided to simply end him in one last blow.
Saiyan,
the Namekian was whispering, somehow still conscious. He was looking at her as though trying to figure something out. Her tail lashed behind her in irritation, and she saw back a fist, ready to fire an energy blast strong enough to disintegrate her.
A tail? The boy?
Gine froze.
What boy? What are you talking about?
King Piccolo chuckled, a wet sound due to all the blood in his mouth. He pulled himself slowly to his feet, not nearly as injured as Gine had assumed he was.
I see now, he said. It all makes sense. You must be his mother, I take it. I can see the family resemblance now, that I know to look for it.
What are you talking about?
Gine growled, starting to lose her composure.
Oh, just reminiscing about a little boy I killed earlier,
King Piccolo said airily. Gine considered this for a moment, and then barked out a bitter laugh.
You killed Kakarot? You must think I'm really stupid.
But the Namekian merely smiled back.
Go on. Try and sense his energy. I know you must be able to, as strong as you are.
Confidently at first, but then with growing panic, Gine reached out with her senses to try to find the bright spot that was her son. He was never usually hard to find. From time to time in his travels, she would reach out just to see what he was doing and how he was. There was no one else on the planet whose flame burned quite... Oh, terribly sorry. Oh dear. Wait one caller. Oh dear. Okay. I don't know what happened there. Okay, right. Sorry about that, everybody. I did something wrong, and I've lost. I've lost the actual thing. So, 1 second. New window.
Technical difficulty counter 3. Hey, guys, this is the purpose of, this is what happens in a what if. And, doing it live. Going live, things happen. I am more than willing to admit that. Yeah. Alright, okay, here we go. Back we are. I was hoping to actually, the reason why what happened, it was basically just because I was hoping that, okay, here we are. Back we go. Confidently at first, but then with growing panic, Gine reached out with her senses to try to find the bright spot that was the sun. He was never usually hard to find. From time to time, in his travels, she would reach out just to see how he was doing. There was no one else on this planet whose flame burned quite as brightly as his, or in quite the same way. And being able to sense him even all the way across the planet was comforting. But this time, she couldn't find him. It wasn't like the times that she'd reached out and his energy was faint. She could always tell if he was merely hungry, injured, or sleeping. This time, he simply wasn't there. All across the planet burned the dim little dots of the mass of humanity, interrupted here and there by the slightly brighter spots of martial arts masters and very strong humans. But there was no pillar of flame that stood out like a tree amongst grass. No familiar, bright, happy, laughing energy that felt like pure joy. Nothing. And its absence tore a hole through Gine's heart. Without warning, she felt a fist slam into her face, and she staggered back. Before she could collect herself, Piccolo was landing blow after blow, fast enough that in a distracted state, all she could do was ineffectively block and simply try to endure the blows. She knew that if she could just get one good hit on him, he was dead. But he wasn't giving her any openings big enough for her to exploit with only half of her attention. Soon, he seemed to realize that mere punches were going to take too long to wear her down, and he planted a foot in her chest and kicked her hard enough to send her flying. She immediately leapt to her feet, hoping this was the opening that she'd been looking for. But it turned out he had merely been giving himself space to start utilizing some kind of energy attack that came from his eyes. One of them hit her in the meat of her arm, and she roared in pain. The attacks weren't particularly powerful, but they were sharp and focused, and she couldn't simply endure them the way that she could his punches. Now completely on the defensive, she could only try to dodge the piercing eye beams, and before long, her dress was dotted with holes. He was speaking, saying something about her son and how easily he had succumbed, and in a flash of insight, Gine realized she was going to lose. Most Saiyans used anger as a source for their power, but anger had only ever made her weak and confused. Her grief and rage over Kakarot's death would not help her now. And on the other hand, Gohan's teachings relied on a calm heart and a clear mind, but she'd only given the idea lip service. It was enough to stay calm while living isolated in the woods, but she'd never expected to find herself in a real fight, not again. Facing a foe that, while in terms of sheer power was beneath her, had her beat through superior experience and skill, was teaching her a lesson she wasn't sure she would survive long enough to learn. Briefly, the assault let up, and she tried desperately to bring enough power to bear to blast him away in the second she had to breathe. But he was already powering up an enormous energy attack of his own, and she knew that this was a race that she could not win. All she could do was cross her arms in front of her and try to brace for impact as best she could. But the impact never came. Instead, there was a sudden release of pressure as the energy Piccolo had been building dissipated all at once. She opened her eyes and caught a brief glimpse of some kind of swirling green vortex, the stretched out spectre of King Piccolo in the middle of it. She turned around and watched as Master Roshi directed the swirl of energy with his hands, guiding it to slam down into an electric rice cooker, which Gohan quickly closed. Roshi collapsed, and Gohan and Gine both ran to him. "It's done," Roshi was gasping, as Gohan gave him energy. He met Gine's eyes and added, "You sure showed me. I feel pretty silly for doubting you now." Gine could only shake her head. Exhausted, she fell to her knees, and then sensing that Gohan was about to echo Roshi's sentiments, she bowed herself to the ground and spoke to him first. "I owe you an apology," she said to the ground. "I've never taken your training seriously. I only ever saw it as a game, and I understand now how incredibly foolish that was. Please accept my apology."
No, Gohan said, sounding embarrassed. "There's no need for all of that. You had no good reason to take it seriously.
By rights, you should never have met someone on this planet who would even be able to stand up to you.
That's exactly the problem, Gine said, not lifting up her head. I've told you about Frieza. Don't you remember?
Yes, but we figured it would be highly unlikely for him to ever come here, right?
And how likely did any of you think it would be for the Demon King to rise again? Gine said harshly. I've been so happy here. I've gotten incredibly complacent. I assumed things would simply go on as they had forever, and that unwillingness to face reality has now cost my son his life.
Gine was unable to continue speaking through the tears that swelled her throat. She felt Gohan's comforting hand on her shoulder. There, my dear. We have almost all the Dragon Balls. We'll simply find the remaining ones and wish him and the others back to life. It's possible Frieza may never come here, and you're worrying for nothing. You helped us achieve a great victory here today, Gine, and you should be proud of that. The Dragon Balls, Roshi said, laboring to stand up. He had the last two! Where are they now? Gohan pulled out the Dragon Radar, and the other two crowded around him to look. They should be around here, he said, puzzled. Gine looked up at the airship that was still hovering over them. As they watched, it began to slowly fly away. With a growl, Gine launched herself into the air and landed on the deck of the airship. A small blue creature with large ears gave a loud shriek and scuttled backwards, tripping over the corpse of some kind of pterodactyl. Gine strode over to him and picked him up by his collar.
Where are the other two Dragon Balls?
She demanded. He gibbered and bluffed, and she shook him.
I'm not a patient woman! Tell me where they are! Your lord needs you!
The small blue man screamed. A woman in a trench coat, holding a minigun, emerged from the control room, and Gine pointed a finger at the gun and blasted it out of her fingers. She brought her face in closer to the small man's and growled,
Dragon Balls, now!
Do as the nice woman says, my, please.
Reluctantly, the woman took 2 Dragon Balls out of her coat pocket and handed them over. Gine, recalling herself, set the little blue man down on the deck gently.
Thank you very much for your cooperation, she said calmly, before leaping off the side of the airship.
Pilaf stood where she had set him, still shaking in shock. Before Mai could ask after his well-being, his body slowly tilted backwards until he fell to the ground.
My lord! Mai yelled, gathering up her emperor and shaking him slightly. Are you all right?
He moaned.
Make a note for the official record, Mai, he said faintly. From now on, no matter what's at stake, we leave anyone with a tail the hell alone.
Oh, wow. Cool. All right, let's just double check something. All right, so we're on, that's chapter 6. That was pretty intense, guys. I gotta say. And yes. All right, let's make sure that we don't do anything silly. Let's get back to the live control room. Because I'd lost my link to that, so now she'll have some water. Very good. All right. Red Dragon Force 2. Pilaf learnt his lesson that day. And Frostbite says, in the What If Gine, I wonder if there was a way Piccolo was around. If King Piccolo escapes Gine somehow, that leads to the original Goku vs. King Piccolo. At that time, I didn't really have a plan for that. So, you know, that's kind of what we're going for. So, there is no Piccolo as a result of all of this. But yeah. So far, so good. Alright. Okay. Chapter 7. Korin and Kami. Gine landed delicately next to Gohan, handing him the last 2 Dragon Balls. She watched with numbed attachment as he summoned the dragon, but before he could speak their wish, a familiar sound jolted through their ears, sending her heart into a gallop. Her eyes snapped up of their own accord to see Kakarot riding the Nimbus toward them at great speed, waving and laughing. Before she could fully process what she was seeing, he had already jumped down and flung herself into her arms.
Ma! He shouted. You're all right! Thank goodness! That's my line, young man,
Gine scolded, holding him out at arm's length. His clothing was ruined, but other than that, he looked totally fine. Relief squeezed her heart so hard, it turned into rage. Just pure rage, leaving her limbs weak and pricking her eyes with hot tears. Had Piccolo tricked her? Or worse, had her own mind been tricking her? Had she overestimated her abilities and simply been unable to sense him, even though he was there? Too many emotions warred for dominance, and she shook her son hard, screaming at him, even as she wanted to fold him in her arms and never let go.
What happened to you? I couldn't sense your energy anywhere. I thought you were dead.
Well, I almost was, Kakarot said offhandedly, his only concession to the shaking being to grasp her wrist to stabilize himself. His total lack of concern at her anger had never infuriated her more than it did now.
But that's not important. Gohan told me you defeated King Piccolo. Is that really true?
Gine's righteous fury faltered.
Well,
She sure did, Roshi said, stepping forward. It was incredible. I've never seen fighting like that in all my life.
Kakarot stared at her in wonder, and Gine felt the rage give one last stab through her body, and then ebb away. She didn't know why Roshi was being so kind. She hadn't defeated Piccolo. He and Gohan had had to seal him away because she'd gotten distracted. Her son was alive, but through no effort of hers. She didn't deserve their praise, and she most certainly did not deserve the awe she saw growing in her son's eyes.
If it weren't for your mother, we were all very likely would have been killed, Gohan said, coming up to join them.
Gine flashed him a warning look that he ignored. Kakarot, still dangling from her arms, opened his mouth to speak, but they were all interrupted by the dragon clearing its throat.
I grow impatient. Speak your wish now.
The flurry of activity that followed put the conversation permanently on hold. They wished back everyone who had been killed by King Piccolo and his children, and then travelled to Kame House to check on everyone there and fill them in on what happened. Roshi, Gohan, and Kakarot all filed through the door, greeted with shouts of joy from inside. But Gine couldn't bring herself to even step onto the porch. She could hear them in there, recounting the battle they insisted on calling her victory, and her shame made it impossible for her to face their gratitude. Kakarot came to join her after a few minutes, now wearing his staff, and he took her by the hand and led her over to the Nimbus. She climbed on, almost in a daze, as Nimbus took off. Every so often, Kakarot would turn back to look at her, as though checking to make sure she was still there. She smiled back whenever he did, still just happy that he was alive and with her. But for most of the flight, she was frowning, deep in thought. Complacency. That was the problem. That was the problem in a nutshell. She had allowed complacency to creep into her heart, and had nearly cost her everything. Gine had wanted to be a fighter for about as long as it took her to get in her first fight, at which point it had become abundantly clear to everyone, herself most of all, that Gine was not a proper Saiyan, and never would be. Being forced to come to Earth had turned out to be a blessing in disguise, for although she mourned her people, she had found fulfillment and happiness here on this alien world full of beings that were pretty much the opposite of Saiyans, weak and senselessly kind. And then when these weak beings had been threatened, when it had been up to her to protect them and repay them for everything they had done for her, she had been unable to. Worse, for once in her life, her power level hadn't been the deciding factor. If she'd managed to hold on to even a tiny fraction of the Saiyan instinct that she'd always shied away from, she would have done away with the Namekian in seconds. Instead, she had allowed him to get inside her head and destroy her confidence, and she hadn't been strong enough to withstand his superior skill on top of the mental onslaught. This particular threat had now been neutralized, no thanks to her. But next time? And it would be foolish to think that there wouldn't be a next time. Even if Frieza never came here, Kakarot had told her of several power-hungry Earthlings he had dispatched. What if one of them somehow grew powerful enough to challenge a Saiyan, or use technology to bridge the gap? Earthlings were weak creatures, but they were wily beyond anything Gine had imagined, and some of them were as bloodthirsty as Saiyans. She thought briefly of the peaceful life in the mountains that she had led, engaging no foes more vicious than deer trying to eat her rhubarb, and knew, though she didn't want to admit it, that those carefree days were over. Suddenly, she noticed they were flying in the wrong direction to be going back to the mountain. Where are we going, Kakarot? Kakarot spun around on the cloud, looking at her eagerly.
I'm taking you to Korin's tower. I want you to teach me everything you know, and then he'll teach us everything he knows, and then I'll teach you the Kamehameha. I had no idea you were so strong, Ma. If I had known that, I would have taken you to Korin's earlier.
Gine had only a vague idea who Korin was. Her son related events in order of interest, not chronologically, and he left many things out entirely. For instance, until the day before, she'd assumed Launch was merely two sisters, and Kakarot had forgotten one of their names or something. Unless she was mistaken, which was very possible, Korin was some kind of con artist, or possibly a healer? Considering she'd only ever heard of him through the lens of Kakarot's storytelling, he was just as likely to turn out to be a cat. Still, Gine couldn't bring herself to tell her son to simply take her home. She reached out and stroked his hair, and he leaned back into the motion, and for just a moment, he was her little boy again. She knew it was an illusion, but she couldn't help but hold on to it, even so. Perhaps this was one of the reasons why Saiyan's mothers didn't grow attached to their young. Allowing herself to love him and then let him leave had turned out to be a sweet kind of pain that only grew harder to bear after nearly losing him for good. Soon, they came to a large tower that stretched far into the sky, and it turned out that Korin was indeed a cat, and a martial arts master to boot. He also seemed able to read minds, and he gave Gine a knowing wink when Kakarot requested that he train them.
Sorry, pal. You lot are stronger than what I know to do with. You're going to have to speak to a higher power if you want someone to train you now.
A higher power?
Kakarot repeated. That staff you got there ain't just for beating people with, you know. It was originally the thing that connected this tower with the sanctuary that floats high above it. That sanctuary the house is God.
Gine tried not to giggle. She really did. It was hard to take him seriously when, not only was he speaking of deities as though it existed, but he was also, well, a cat. The cat gave her a sourpuss look. Kakarot merely looked confused.
What are you talking about?
It'll be easier if you just go up there and see for yourself, kid, Korin said. Both of you are strong enough that God is the only one who could train you now.
If the Earthlings thought a Namekian was a demon, there was no telling what their god might turn out to be. In spite of herself, Gine grew curious.
Okay,
Kakarot sang out happily.
How do we meet this god guy?
Korin pointed up heavenward.
Simply place your staff in the sconce on the very top of this tower and extend it all the way up. And take this bell as proof that you came with my blessing.
Kakarot took the bell and did as instructed, Gine following, bemused. Before Kakarot made the staff extend, however, Korin had one piece of advice for them that sobered her considerably.
Oh, and when you get up there, don't worry. Your eyes ain't playing tricks on you, but remember, neither am I.
Korin's words fell into place the moment she saw Kami's face. He was waiting for them, standing next to a rotund person in a turban. But both she and her son had only had eyes for the tall green man, who looked exactly like King Piccolo.
Greetings, he said,
but was able to get out no more than that before Kakarot shouted ferociously and leapt forward. Gine had just enough presence of mind to grab him by the tail and yank him back.
Who are you?
She demanded, holding her son upside down by his tail. Korin's assurances notwithstanding, if his answer wasn't satisfactory, she would let her son go and join him in battle.
I am Kami, the Namekian said,
and Gine could see that his eyes held no cruelty.
I suppose I can't blame you for mistaking me for Piccolo, but I assure you, we are two separate beings. Though this was not always the case. Long ago, he and I were one. In order to become Kami, I had to expel all the evil from my heart, and that evil became Piccolo. This has long been my shame, and in gratitude for you defeating him, I will grant you any request.
Kakarot finally squirmed out of Gine's grip and landed lightly on his feet.
I want to train with you.
It was as though his previous aggression had been totally forgotten. Gine had time to smile at his innocence before he pointed out at her and added,
And so does my ma.
The smile fell from her face, and she opened her mouth to say, well, something, but before she could, Kami nodded, stroking his chin.
I see, he said. Very well.
Kakarot danced around delighted, and Gine tried to think of some way to politely decline. Kami caught her gaze and gave her a knowing look, and although his face was kind, It also put her in mind of his evil counterpart. His horrible laughter echoed in her ears, and she swallowed down her objections. Next time, she wouldn't flounder. Next time, she would be ready. And if that meant training with this old Namekian, so be it. Kakarot looked up at her with an expression of such pure joy that it was impossible not to answer it with a smile of her own. All right, cool. We're doing pretty well, guys. This definitely takes a lot out of you, geez. Paparacha says, I now desperately want Dragon Ball as told by Goku. Yeah, no, this is going good. And probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to where Dragon Ball ends and Dragon Ball Z starts, just in case this chap writes more, so we actually have a natural point. So this time we're doing Dragon Ball, and this time, and then the next one, if we do one, we'll do Z. So there we go. Hope you guys are enjoying it thus far. Checking the streams, stream things. Everything seems to be going all right. Cool. All right. Okay. Now, there was an author's note that basically said that they weren't too sure about whether Kakarot had a tail or not. So, for this one, in this story, it's as if Kakarot doesn't have one. So, you know, or it doesn't have one at this moment. Chapter 8. And it's called Saiyans at Sunrise. Gine sat at the edge of the lookout, staring at the growing silver of pink at the edge of the sky. Kakarot's sleeping head on her lap, and felt Kami come to stand next to her. It was the right thing to do, he said, and Gine slowly shook her head. I know that, but he and I are the only two left. I'm the only Saiyan alive who remembers our culture. So anything I choose not to pass on won't get passed on. It feels like I'm killing them all over again every time I don't tell him something. I know I've been raising him as an Earthling all this time, so it shouldn't matter now, but this feels like I've crossed some line I can't uncross. Kami shifted slightly. But his tail has grown back before, yes? It won't this time, Gine said flatly. He's too old, and there's too much scar tissue. He'll never be an Uzaru again. She buried her face in her hands. Kami put a hand on her shoulder, and he kept it there until the sun rose. Ma, my butt hurts. Gine looked down at her son, who in turn looked up at her. His eyes were red and his hair even more mussed than normal. His voice was hoarse, and there was a faint question in his eyes. Lay on your side, then, she said reasonably. He complied. What happened? He asked after he was comfortable. You went to Uzaru, and we had to cut off your tail, she said bluntly. Kakarot was silent for a moment as he digested this. I'm sorry, he said. I know I'm real bad about looking at the moon when I shouldn't. That's okay, Gine said, although she didn't quite mean it. It won't grow back this time. Oh, that's good then, Kakarot said, his easygoing acceptance piercing her heart like an arrow. I guess I get real strong when that happens, but since I don't remember it, it sort of feels like cheating. Plus, I just make a big mess anyway. It was all true, but not one bit of it made Gine feel any better. She stroked her fingers through his hair for a few more minutes, and then he spoke again. Ma, you've gone Uzaru before, right? How did you keep from making a big mess? Gine tilted her head back and looked up at the fading stars. On planet Vegeta, the moon came full only once a year. In her girlhood, there had been a planet-wide festival to celebrate it, a 24-hour period during which everyone, except the extremely old, took on the Great Ape form. It was a time of drinking and feasting, and off in the mountains, away from the young ones, orgies and couplings. Many children were born after the festival to an unknown parentage, and Gine herself had been one of those. She felt that it made it extra ironic that the festival was her least favourite time of year, and she avoided participating whenever possible. Still, being forced to take on the form once a year had allowed her to gain what little control over it that she'd had. There was always that one guy who destroyed some important building, or killed someone he shouldn't have on the festival night, and woke up the next morning with egg on his face. And at the very least, she could say that she had never been that guy. Practice, she said. Kakarot was silent for another few minutes, and Gine took the moment, the sky smeared with the pinks and oranges of sunrise, her son's hair in her fingers, his head a welcome weight on her lap, and pressed it into her memory like a flower between the pages of a book She knew that she would not have another moment like this again. Kakarot was starting to shed his baby fat, and although he was already several inches taller than he had been when they arrived at the lookout, soon he would be physically mature, and her little baby boy would be gone. For so long she had been waiting for that day, and now that it was imminent, she wanted to delay it as long as she could. She wondered if he would still look like Bardock once he was grown. She wondered if she wanted him to. "Ma?" Kakarot said slightly. She glanced down, surprised to find him falling asleep again. "How come you never told me you were so strong?" This is Gine's internal monologue, by the way. "I'm not. Every Saiyan I've ever known was stronger than me, and you probably will be too. But both of us are so much stronger than every other Earthling we will ever meet. Strength is not the metric I wanted you to use to judge people. Besides, I was enjoying pretending to be an Earthling too much. Would I have kept the secret if I had known how much it would be sparring with you, son? I never did quite believe Gohan when he told me I could fight without being a bloodthirsty monster, find joy in the fight without finding joy in the violence. But somehow you found that balance, and now you're showing it to me. Is this what it means to be a Saiyan raised on Earth?" This is what she says. "It never came up," she said, and somehow he accepted it. Oh, right. Whew, okay. Wow, we're only 7 likes away, guys. Come on, we can do this. We can do this, people. Alright. Okay. Okay, let's see where we are. Okay. This is going to probably be the last chapter, guys, because we will then go into Z. And hey, yeah, we made to 1,000 likes. Woo! Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. This is awesome. This is great. This is the most likes I've ever had for a live stream. Jeez. Okay. Right. One last gulp of water. Right. So, this is our last chapter, everybody. Let's see what... Actually, let's just check. Don't worry. Yeah, do let them know about this live stream. I would like them to know. I'd like them to know, and this hopefully would motivate them to do more. But yeah, no, don't worry. If they do more, we will be back and do more of this. Okay, so final chapter tonight. Breathe. Whew. Chapter 9, The Forgotten Fiancé. It was raining on the day of the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai. Despite the weather, the grounds were packed with people, including Gine and Kakarot. "Do you see him yet, Ma?" Kakarot asked, tipping on his toes to look overhead. "I can't wait to show him how much I've grown." Gine smiled and followed more sedately, twirling a straw umbrella in her hands. It had only been 3 years, but it felt like an entire lifetime since she'd seen their old friends. The prospect of seeing them now gave her slight butterflies, but the calm heart that she had cultivated on Kami's lookout quelled her nerves, and she could look forward to seeing them with more enjoyment than anxiety. "Oh, look! There they are!" Kakarot grabbed her arm and dragged her through the crowd until they came up to a stop in front of Roshi, Grandpa Gohan, Bulma, and Launch. "Wow! You guys look great!" "Who?" Bulma began, but then spotted Gine behind Kakarot, and her mouth dropped open. Her eyes ping-ponged between them in disbelief. "No way! You're not little Kakarot!" "Not so little, but definitely still Kakarot," Gine confirmed as her son grinned ear to ear. She and Bulma leaned in for a quick hug. "It's good to see you, dear." "Where's Yamcha?" Bulma rolled her eyes. "As soon as he heard you guys were training up with Kami, he left on some trip to go and train in the desert. I haven't seen him since. And good riddance." Bulma turned up her nose, but Gine could tell her indifference was mostly an act. She smiled indulgently and turned to see Gohan chatting with Kakarot. The old man saw her, and a wide grin broke out over his face. "Gine, it's been so long. How have you been, my dear?" They embraced. "I see Kakarot has finally become a man," he said. "He's as tall as one," Gine said with an affectionate eye roll. "You're going to be amazed at his strength. He intends to enter the tournament, but I don't really know what for." "You should enter too, Ma," Kakarot said, turning from where he was showing off his height to Roshi and Bulma.
We could fight each other in the final match. What do you say?
Gine shook her head.
I'll leave the fun and games to you, son, she said.
Oh. It's like, oh, you think it will be that easy, do you? Said a familiar voice. They turned to find Tenshinhan, accompanied by Chaozu, Yamcha, and Krillin, all road-weary but smiling. Tenshinhan stepped forward and bowed to Gine. Ma'am, I would be honored if you would enter. I've gotten a lot stronger since the last time we met, and I'm eager to test my skills against you.
I can see that,
Gine said, using the insight that she had developed while training with Kami to perceive what Tenshinhan was capable of. For an Earthling, it was truly impressive. Apparently, he'd taken their last interaction as a challenge. So have I, but I didn't gain the strength to use it. Oh, sorry.
So have I, but I didn't gain the strength to use it to win a tournament. Aw, Ma, don't make it sound like I'm being selfish,
Kakarot whined.
I just want to see how strong everyone's gotten is all. There's nothing wrong with you entering, Kakarot,
Gine said mildly.
I just don't want to, that's all.
She could see Tenshinhan hiding his disappointment, but she knew he'd be even more disappointed if they fought. Oh, it's not fair, Krillin wailed, looking up at Kakarot's new height. No offense, ma'am, but I was starting to think the males of your species were just smaller than the women. There's no way I can catch up to that. Everyone laughed, and into this merriment, 2 more people entered, one of them considerably taller than even Kakarot. My word, Gohan exclaimed. Ox King, is that you? It sure is, Gohan, the Ox King boomed. Long time no see. The 2 men began to catch up, and the other figure, who had been standing in Ox King's shadow, stepped forward, coming to rest with a bounce immediately in front of Kakarot. She was a beautiful young woman, and her long black hair and large black eyes made her look, to Gine at least, almost Saiyan.
Kakarot, she said, peering behind them at Gine. Is that your ma?
Yeah, but who are you? Kakarot said, puzzled. The young woman reared back and glared at him.
Who do you think, dummy? That's my pa back there. Ox King's your... Wait, Chi-Chi?
Kakarot gaped at the young woman before him.
But you were a little girl. And you were a little boy, she snapped. And it looks like you still are. Next you'll be telling me you forgot your promise.
Chi-Chi's eyes immediately blazed with anger.
Are you telling me you forgot your promise to marry me? I did?
Gine, who knew her son could be forgetful, but not that forgetful, watched the exchange with breathless anticipation. So did everyone else.
You said you'd come back and ask my father for my hand. Are you saying you don't remember that? I did say something like that. I guess.
Kakarot admitted, scratching his head.
But what does that mean, to ask for someone's hand? I don't want no buddy parts. I ain't that kind of guy.
Gine snorted before she could help herself. Krillin put a hand over his mouth, to hide his giggles, and Bulma, arm already hooked into Yamcha's, rolled her eyes. Kakarot turned to his mother with a helpless look, but Gine was not about to bail him out. She raised a meaningful eyebrow, and eventually he turned back to Chi-Chi.
You're saying we gotta get married because I wanted your hand? Gotta? Gotta?
Chi-Chi spluttered indignantly.
Well, if marrying me would be such a hardship, then maybe you should just forget it.
Chi-Chi thrust her nose up in the air and turned her back on Kakarot, addressing Gine instead.
Ma'am, may I present to you my father, the Ox King?
The girl couldn't have been more than about 110 pounds soaking wet, so Gine was impressed to see her take her giant father by the arm and drag him to the fore. Oddly, there was a blush flaming on his cheeks, but the reason for it became clear when Kakarot chose that exact moment to lean over and whisper in Gine's ear.
Ma, remember, he's single.
Gine elbowed her son hard in the kidney.
I'm aware of that, Kakarot. You bring it up every time you mention him. I'll just leave you two to get acquainted,
Chi-Chi said with a suggestive smile, taking Kakarot by the arm and leading him away, already berating him again. Ox King scratched his head, smiling nervously. It seems my girl is setting on marrying your boy, he said. He seems like a nice feller. I wouldn't mind having him as a son-in-law, actually. Gine glanced at their 2 children. Chi-Chi was yelling at Kakarot, her voice carrying easily despite being some distance away. Kakarot was just standing there taking it, slowly rubbing the back of his head with one hand. Gine had lectured her son more times than she could count, but he'd never once reacted to her with sheepishness. The pity she had sometimes felt for her future daughter-in-law, assuming Kakarot could, or even wanted to, get himself a wife, seemed silly now. Gine smiled. "The feeling is mutual," she said. And with that is it. Wow. Whew, that was a long one. 2 hours. Okay. Let's see what we got. Okay. Red Dragon Force 2 says, "I'm curious why the Z Fighters never use the Dragon Balls to have the Saiyans choose to change into a Zaru rather than being forced to do so. I haven't really actually thought about that in a way. But, no, I have, though. Paparazzi says, doctor's appointment, so I'll watch the rest later. So, don't worry, Paparazzi, it's going to be here for when you get back. Paparazzi says, nope, still waiting. Bye." Okay, well, you've managed to get there to the ending. So, do let the author of this know that I would love him to do more. It'd be so good. And yeah, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Before I accept After K, literally 2 chapters. It's only because I want to wait until there's more. So that means we actually have an ending point for the Dragon Ball, and then when we can do more, we can do Z. So, if you want to read the remaining 2 chapters, you can do. But, again, I want to have like a natural ending point, and I feel like this is a good one. So, there we go. Who is the author again? Megane-chan720. And you can check them on fanfiction.net. And Airheaded Aviator, thank you very much. Okay. Oof. Okay. Right, I am going to go and take a break. I am absolutely bushed. Like, no joke. Oof. Okay. Let's get this thing back properly. Is this not? Okay. Alright, there we go. Oof. Well, let me know, guys, down in the comments that whether you like this format. And you should put the link in the description. I have indeed. The link is indeed in the description. So do check that out there. But anyway, guys, hope you guys did enjoy it. And let me know if you'd like to see more of these. Probably maybe a little bit shorter than this. But again, thank you guys for watching. And I hope you enjoy and having the rest of your day. And come back for more. Anyway, take care, guys. Have a good night.